Welcome back this week to our super happy fun hour. We like to call it the Pro Wrestling Review. I'm Renee Detour from the Tribune Review. Joining us this week, as always, Jim DeBruza to my left, Tom Combetti to my right. Brian's not with us this week. He's currently negotiating with Vince McMahon to buy the rights to ECW, which we're keeping our fingers crossed for that one because we want to have access to all those cool DVDs and stuff. And Jim, I know, likes the Chris Candido figure.
Well, I have 3 already.
Well, you can always use a 4th. I think here he comes in different colored types.
One comes with his own razor blade.
Oh, jeez. Another secret revealed on Pro Wrestling Review.
Next week, Jim DeBruza won't be joining us. He'll be in court. No,
yeah, I noticed you say as always. Will there ever be a time that Tom Combetti is not as always on Pro Wrestling Review?
Well, last week you were Thomas, so we had to change things.
There's no show without you, pal.
Well, we were in that production meeting, and they wanted you to address me as Thomas. I can understand that, and him as James.
Yeah,
I think
it goes along the lines of me getting you coffee and things like that.
We were told to refer to you as Ronaldo, but I don't think you really like that.
No, I could do without that, really. I had enough of that in junior high, I think. But we wanted to talk this week a little bit about one of the bigger stories that broke, and that was Bret Hart. There were a lot of rumors on the internet. Actually, Dave Scheer from OneWrestling.com reported that Bret Hart was coming back to the WWF and, in fact, going to lead the WCW crew, I guess you could say, into WWF territory, part of the Invasion angle. Later on in the week, we found out that Dave Meltzer from Wrestling Observer reported that this wasn't true and that the sources that was it Bob Ryder?
Bob Ryder, I think, had a story. Yeah.
They're all from the same place. Yeah. But he reported that Dave Meltzer had said that this was going to happen. But again, Dave Meltzer said it wasn't true. We've heard a lot about this. I mean, what do you guys think, one, about the possibility of Bret coming back, and two, this whole story that broke?
Well, I'm reminded of an Eric Bischoff quote back when he was sitting out of his WCW contract and about whether or not he would come back to WCW and run the business. And the quote was, it would take more than a miracle and slightly less than an act of God. And guess what? Bischoff came back.
Yeah.
So in the pro wrestling business,
him working with Vince Russo too.
Well, I'd love to work with Vince Russo. Who wouldn't, though? I'd jump at the chance. But something in the pro wrestling business that's always a constant, even when logic is gapping from many times, as we saw on Raw. Nothing is ever final. Well, that's a little segue into our next segment, but nothing is ever final in the wrestling business. It wouldn't surprise me if in a week or so, well, not a week or so, sometime in the future you see Bret Hart and Vince McMahon embracing in the ring with Bret, giving the kick to the low blow. But go ahead, Jim.
I don't think I can follow that now. No, but there's 2 things to remember in wrestling. Number 1, there's always a stranger story that's going to happen, and certainly this Bret Hart thing is pretty strange. And number 2, Shane Douglas, I think, proved it. No bridge is ever burned in professional wrestling.
Well, that's one thing with Bret Hart, too. I mean, he always talks about his tattered legacy and how the Montreal incident screwed his career. And I mentioned this week in a column I posted on the website that, WCW did more screwing of Bret Hart's career than Vince McMahon and Survivor Series ever could have. And, I think Bret kind of fails to realize that when he talks about how Vince screwed him.
I think, you're absolutely right. I think Vince sent him off to WCW as a hero. And,
it was a perfect segue to WCW. He could have been a tremendous babyface, and WCW made him a referee in his first appearance. I mean,
I certainly don't want to put out any of Brian's ideas, but at the time, he from pretty much a few months after the whole thing said, this whole thing is an angle. The whole Montreal screw job was an angle. It's looking more and more now that he's right. I mean, the points he brought up, again, McMahon becomes a killer heel, or at least starts to at that point. Bret goes to WCW, becomes what he should have been a big face, and
he's refereeing Larry Zbyszko and Eric Bischoff in a karate match or whatever it was.
Right.
So
and now, if there's even a slight grain of truth in this story with Bret Hart, it's all coming full circle again.
Well, in addition to the first match he refereed, him and Flair also had a brief but feud that was actually very, very decent on, I believe the old Sold Out was their first match.
Right.
And once, the higher-ups, Hulk Hogan, not to mention any names, got wind of that, and the buy rate was actually big, they put Bret in his place. So you can't really blame Bret. Or just blame the creative team in WCW for not knowing what to do with him.
Maybe lack thereof of a creative team or the management.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, you know what? You can blame WCW a lot. You got to put a lot of blame on Bret Hart as well. Yeah, he got bitter towards the end of his WCW reign. I don't blame him. But he also said a lot of things about the WWF and Vince McMahon about this whole screw job thing, and unfortunately Owen Hart involved as well, that whole incident.
Which are 2 separate things, let's point out. I mean,
it is just,
people tie this stuff together, and it's really not right. It's not fair to either situation. The ramifications of the Owen situation have nothing at all to do with Bret, but yet somehow Bret always seems to bring that up.
I think it's Bret the one that's tying it together.
Well, yeah, that's the point.
And just to finish up that point there, you can't blame WCW for all the whining Bret Hart has done over the past 2 years.
Let's blame
very good point.
I don't know.
Blame Goldberg. He's the one who kicked him.
He seems like a good scapegoat. I just kind of picked him.
I just wanted to elaborate on what I brought up before about wrestling makes for strange bedfellows, and for those of you out there that that's a little over my head too. That it'll never ceases to amaze me what you'll see in wrestling. On Raw this past Monday, you have Jesse Ventura and Vince McMahon in the same ring. Jesse Ventura, this is the one who sued Vince McMahon for $800,000 of royalties of the WWF's money out of McMahon's own pocket. They were in the ring together last night, and at SummerSlam some years past, '99 I believe. Right. So once again, I mean, nothing ever ceases to amaze me. I'd also like to bring up the fact that I'm on a roll here, so I'm just going to keep on rolling with it.
Keep rolling their take.
But right before Owen Hart passed away, there were rumors circulating the internet, and take rumors for what they are, that Bret Hart was thinking about going back to the WWF. This was around the same time that the rumors about the Montreal incident were an angle as opposed to a shoot. But you have to wonder if Owen Hart didn't pass away and there wasn't so much bad blood between Bret Hart, I'm going to say, and McMahon in the WWF, he might be in the WWF now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Owen's situation kind of maybe threw a wrench in those plans. I don't want to downplay Owen's situation at all, but I do know what you mean. But one of the things that Bret, and we talked about this before, talking about his legacy and how he feels that he was cheated out of his career and yada, yada, yada. But one of the things that I think, if he did come back to the WWF or even compete with a new WCW, is that Vince McMahon is the only person right now that could save Bret Hart's legacy or career. I mean, look what he's done for him in the past, and this is another thing I mentioned in the column that I posted. When the WWF was moving in a different direction in the early '90s, they were moving away from your Hulk Hogan's and your Ultimate Warriors, and he gave Bret Hart an opportunity to run with the WWF title. And to me, that would be invaluable to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. But also, when Bret Hart left the WWF, it also allowed him to take another direction that they needed to go to keep their business alive. That, according to some, wasn't the direction Bret Hart wanted to go.
So now I guess Bret knows how Hogan felt back in the early 90s.
Yeah, and we can go on like this for hours, but Bret Hart's got to put a lot of things under the carpet, and it'll be good for the business if it happens. But
I'd just like to say this in closing as we're running out of time here. If Bret were to appear on Raw, and you talk about Vince McMahon resurrecting his career, for Bret to even appear on Raw, he would be probably, I would say, just the biggest star, or the biggest face, or the biggest heel, depending on what he did with McMahon in the ring. He either punched him or he hugged him. He would be the number one, he would be the most talked about wrestler that week, that month, whatever, what have you. Bret, your legacy's right back where it started. Screw the WCW thing. I don't remember what you did anyway, so, not the Larry Zbyszko thing coming out of the
Time
boot,
stands still,
which was
WCW.
great.
So we're going to come back and we're going to delve into Raw, so please stay with us.
If you will. And we'd like to dabble and jump right into the events of this past Monday's Raw. That's what they have written for me. I can't.
The cue cards are right over there.
I see them now. But anyway, the WWF continued with another strong main event for at least 3 or 4 weeks in a row. So something bad's going to happen next week or this coming Monday. Like Steve Blackman's going to interfere in the main event.
Yeah, they're going to show the best of the Undertaker tape, I think, when he buried guys and stuff.
The only thing I have to question, and I'm sure we're going to get into this as the segment rolls on, why give away the King of the Ring pay-per-view match on Raw, free on TV? Can anybody help me here?
Well, I mean, at the time, I guess they were in the process of changing the main event, but it's a good point. Everybody thought that the main event was going to be Chris Jericho versus Steve Austin, and they went ahead and had it last night. I mean, it was a great match, and one that could have been shown on pay-per-view. I mean, I think it was strong enough. I think Jericho was strong enough. I really thought Austin was strong enough.
Well, obviously the explanation is they're obviously going a different direction for the main events, but the only other thing I can think of is maybe they felt the need to get Raw as strong as possible. Not that it justifies there isn't a pay-per-view main event, but.
Well, I mean, I think if you look to the past and the way the WWF has done things, they used to have, I remember after Rock won the WWF title, he beat Mankind in that Survivor Series tournament. The next night on Raw, they gave away Steve Austin versus The Rock. And it was one of the better TV matches that WWF's ever had. And, the match was set up in a way that it didn't exactly kill future matches. It was done in a way to get people excited about it, and then they went ahead and had it on pay-per-view anyway.
Well, I don't think this would kill any future matches between Chris Jericho or Steve Austin, but is Jericho at the level that The Rock and Austin were back at that time where, I mean, I know Jericho has his critics out there, and I really...
I'm sorry, go ahead. Finish
I was just going to say, I don't know what it's going to take from Chris Jericho on his part to silence his critics. How many more strong matches he has, or his interviews are too goofy, or this or that, he wears lifts. But in my eyes, Chris Jericho is established as a main eventer. But as far as, you know what I'm trying to say here.
A serious interview I thought from Jericho this past Monday.
Yeah. I liked how he mentioned how he won the title from Hunter and how it felt. I mean, those kind of little things, that's what makes a good promo. Exactly. In my opinion, anyway.
Just to get back to your point, is Chris Jericho on the same level as The Rock was back then? Probably not. Is he your best, arguably one of your top two faces? Yeah.
I would say so.
That's reason enough to keep pushing more.
With the Undertaker screwing around with this stalker, so to speak.
Yeah.
Chris Jericho is your number one face in the company.
Well, I think a lot of the criticism that came out of this match was the fact that Steve Austin defeated Chris Jericho relatively cleanly. He beat him with a stunner. People forget to mention, of course, that Mick Foley hit Jericho in the head with a steel chair after Regal interfered. So, there's a lot of people that jump to conclusions, and I guess that's natural. That's just the way the business has been going with the internet and things like that. Everybody just jumps out and says, well, this is wrong, or something like that. But I don't really see it that way, in my opinion.
Well, I don't really see it that way either, but I think the thing that really hurts a potential rematch at King of the Ring is the fact that he did lose at the stunner. Yeah, there's a lot of outside interference, but people are going to go away saying, yeah, Austin hit the stunner. I think that's the one thing.
But he also kicked out of a chair shot, too, though.
That's true, too. But that's the one thing. I think this close to King of the Ring, I don't think he can do it now. I think maybe you should have gone DQ Monday night. Maybe, I don't know, have another chair shot or something, or double team on Jericho to get the pin. But
as of this taping on Tuesday, there is a new main event for King of the Ring, and do you want to jump into that? I mean, I don't know if this is in stone or not. I don't know where it was reported, but apparently Steve Austin is going to defend his WWF title against Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit in a three-way match. And we brought this up on the way down here. Why do you have two faces against the heel? Normally, it's the two heels against the face in a three-way match to tease dissension between the two heels.
Right.
What do you want two faces to be shoving each other back and forth?
Yeah, and that's the thing, too, that it seems like with the WWF booking, they're going to go in a direction of having Jericho and Benoit possibly feud down the line, which, I mean, if you have them have some tension at King of the Ring, if this match does happen, that's fine if you want to have a match, say, like 6 or 8 months down the road. But, don't start this stuff with them now and then in the midst of their pushes and then have them wrestle, say, like on SmackDown or Raw, that same week.
That's been my criticism of the WWF the last couple of months. It seems like everything they're doing is in fast forward. And if they go this direction with Jericho and Benoit, number one, it's way too freaking soon. Number two, it's only going to work if you let them, do something with the tag titles. You guys remember that, don't you? The big metal belts they wear. But I think the match itself can work. I don't think you have to play tension with Benoit and Jericho. If you do, maybe 6 months down the line, you can look back at that. I say, hey, make it a free for all. It's not like Jericho and Benoit are that close where they're not going to go after the title.
I mean, could we date this whole back to Triple H injuring his leg and basically throwing a monkey wrench into I keep saying that so fast, the WWF's plans? He was supposed to feud with Chris Benoit, probably with a match at King of the Ring, where the other match would have been Jericho-Austin for the title. I don't know if the WWF felt the need to throw another proverbial monkey wrench.
You know what the thing is, and we talked about the faces pushing each other, but if you kind of remember how the WWF put this team together, there's always been that tension between the two, because they have feuded so many times and given us some great matches, but there's always been, from a storyline perspective, tension between the two, but it's that respected tension. And, so I think it wouldn't be out of the ordinary to see them pushing and shoving at King of the Ring. Well, but again, in the midst of this push, that's where you have to bring up the question.
Well, I think it's one of those situations where more than just pushing and shoving. I mean, if they double team Steve Austin all night, how's Steve Austin going to walk away with the belt that night?
How can you cheer a guy that's being double teamed?
Yeah, that's the thing. Austin's supposed to be the heel, and yet he's being put in a babyface position.
I'm sorry. How could you boo a guy that's being double teamed? I just want to clarify that. But here's the
I'm done.
That's what I'm saying. I think just to finish up, I think Jericho and Benoit, they go full out that match if it happens. And just let him wrestle. It's not going to hurt anything.
What does this do for future pay-per-view main events, though? Say Austin wins. He beats both Jericho and Benoit, theoretically, as they say, well, I beat 30 guys in the Rumble, along those lines. You understand what I'm saying.
I beat 29 other guys.
Who does he feud with over the summer? I mean, with a Rock return possibly for SummerSlam, he can feud. There's a big money match there. But if he beats the number 1 and number 2 faces in the company, we don't want to see The Undertaker because, he's dealing with Maury Povich right now. So
Prince Albert's lurking in his weeds.
Oh, please don't say that.
No,
but who does Austin feud with over the summer? Like I said, pending The Rock doesn't come back.
Well, that depends on whether or not, or the direction they're going to go with his King of the Ring match. Is Austin?
It's in stone already.
Well, okay, we're going to say it's going to happen, but is Austin in a position to win this? Like you said, if he wins this match, what's left?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
There's one other factor I want to throw in here real quick. Everyone talked about with Triple H going down, who's going to be the next heel to step up. William Regal's the only one that can. And so far, in my opinion, he hasn't been elevated much more than what he has been before. I think that's a factor. I'm not saying, Team Regal with Austin go against Jericho and Benoit for the tag titles. I mean, if you do that, you have to have a really strong King of the Ring tournament. But that's really only getting back to your concerns. That's really, if you want to avoid that altogether, that's the match you got to put in King of the Ring main event.
Yeah, but again, like you said, I mean, tag team matches might not be the way they want to go with this. So Well, we're going to come back, and we'll probably touch a little bit more on this, but we're also going to talk a little bit more about other things that happened on Raw, so stay with us.
Raw this past Monday, watching the Taz Rhino match, I'm thinking to myself, man, if these guys were just a couple inches taller, they could be stars.
Who's taller of the two? Did you see that one?
Was it Rhino?
Yeah.
Was it Rhino?
So it was B Rhino.
Maybe his hair was proof.
Taz wasn't wearing his happy shoes, though. You know, the ones that.
And Taz didn't have that former crew cut. It was like up to here on him.
Well, I had the joy of walking into the match as it was half over, and the first thing I saw was Taz jumping on Rhino's back, and I didn't realize he was putting him in the Kata Hajime or the Taz mission. I thought Rhino grabbed Taz's headset and was doing a sound check. I just wasn't sure because I walked in after getting some pretzels. So.
But in all seriousness, though, I mean, you see that match. It was a good match, and yet you know that nothing's ever going to come of it when you see Taz in the ring. The guy got a huge pop when he came out. I mean, people recognize him obviously from working with that stiff Michael Cole on Sunday Night Heat. So
carrying Michael Cole, which is really scary.
That's amazing.
He's a whole other issue. But anyway, I mean, I think it's really sad to see Taz wrestle, do such a good job, and then he'll go right back to being an announcer. I mean,
yeah. And to the credit of Rhino, and you guys certainly believed before I did, he's showing a lot more than I ever expected of him. The thing about Taz is, part of me keeps saying, "Well, everybody just calm down. He'll get his shot. He'll get his shot."
Yeah, I think when's Tough Enough start?
Next month, I think. But yeah, there's another part of me that thinks, well, he put on a performance like that Monday night. Granted, Rhino's good, but he is still very, very inexperienced. And, you know, when's Taz going to get a chance?
Who knows? To me, you know, the WWF makes a lot of good decisions, but this is when it comes to announcing, I don't know what they're thinking, but.
I thought maybe even, you know, Taz would follow in Lawler's footsteps as he's kind of replacing him as color commentator. You remember how Lawler was always at King of the Ring, never did anything. He wrestled a couple matches.
Always got the crap knocked out of him.
Because he was king. And that travesty with the Ultimate Warrior and Lawler, that was one for the ages, I'll tell you that.
Oh boy,
if you didn't drink a 12-pack of Coke after watching that match, you don't deserve to live.
Was that Mr. Hughes? Was Mr. Hughes involved in that?
Oh, I really hope so, but I don't think he was.
Was that the whole Gold Dust Ultimate Warrior thing? Another debacle on the wrestling landscape.
Was that a King of the Ring?
I don't think it was the King of the Ring, but no, that was at WrestleMania. Was it WrestleMania?
Well, you can tune in next week for our King of the Ring moments segment, but we're going to get back to this year's tournament. We saw brothers Matt and Jeff Hardy feud, and you had a good point that you brought up about that when we were watching it.
Well, yeah, on WWF.com, they actually had Eddie Guerrero versus Matt Hardy. Of course, we're going to get into that later. You know, they had the little pictures up and everything. Naturally, it was changed, but we saw Jeff and Matt, as we have many times in the past, wrestle where this panelist on Pro Wrestling Review was screaming that one of them should turn on the other one. You know, break the Hardys up. Imagine that. Their time is over as a tag team.
Yeah, but who gets
they
Lita?
didn't.
Who gets that bashing of time?
Cut her in half.
Oh, if I could only.
What's that old story from the Bible about killing the cat? You can have it, so I don't want to kill it. You know what I'm. Well, that's a bad religious reference.
Is that where you tell the other person to take it and then?
Oh yeah, the person who doesn't want it gets it inadvertently through no fault of his own. Yeah. I don't see how that works in this day and age, but that's another issue. It was like a baby or something. I don't remember what. Anyway, we're really getting off on a tangent here.
Dodging a silver bullet.
But like I said, the Hardys didn't break up, much to my dismay. The high time.
Oddly enough, I'm still not interested in the Hardys.
I realize that.
All they went through, they showed slight improvement in the ring finally. After
maybe breaking them up will inspire them. I mean, in your eyes, anyway. I mean, maybe they'll actually
what are they going to do? Feud them with Edge and Christian after they split up?
Oh yeah, if they split up, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, speaking of breaking up is hard to do. We saw Edge and Christian kind of tease a breakup as they both entered the King of the Ring tournament. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I think it's time for these two to split up. They don't necessarily have to go their separate ways.
I just wanted to hear the word separate ways.
Well, yeah,
I watched the Journey behind the music over the weekend, so
it was important to get it out there. But I don't know about you, but I really do think that it's time for these two to do their own thing.
In this case, the fact that they've held the titles, I mean, there's really nothing more you can do with Edge and Christian.
They're basically a version of Harlem Heat. We've held the title 14 times. Great. Yeah. Who cares?
But it remains to be seen who's going to be the star of those two. I mean, I think highly of both.
Well, it's funny because I think Edge has the better personality and look of a wrestler, but I think Christian's the better worker and probably would be the better heel. But, you know.
I've said this before. Edge, just in my eyes, looks like the natural face. He's tall, he's lanky.
Right.
Christian's smaller, more built like a rhino, let's say. Ooh, what a great segue. But Christian, I think, has better mic skills, too. Well, so far, so to speak. You know, the goofiness in their interviews, he would be more goofy.
Good point.
Thank you.
The tie-in with Edge and Christian, we always got to bring up the appearance of Hugh Morris this past Monday.
who gave a moonsault to Edge, and it looked like he killed him. But other than that, it was very productive.
I'd comment on it, but once again, I was out of the room getting pretzels. So I'm just a pretzel junkie. Coke and pretzels.
Pretzel kind of guy. But I mean, to me, it didn't have the same impact as Lance Storm because I don't think anybody knew who Hugh Morris was. I think he thought he was a vendor who dropped his tray and just ran in the ring. But
well, did he? What was he wearing?
He was wearing his. I don't even know what his name was when WCW shut down. But
William Debop or whatever.
Yeah, it was Hugh Morris. He just came in his regular attire, and they flashed a WCW logo up, and he did a moonsault and ran through the crowd. And I mean, people kind of was like, but it's Hugh, like I'm supposed to care.
In the WWF's infinite wisdom, they'll replay a commercial from Stacker 200-300 times on the same show. They didn't replay this once, and I realized the point of not replaying it is that WCW has no place here, but I didn't see it.
Well, you can always watch Livewire for the first 51 minutes.
No, because everything's bleeped out, including his name. I don't know who it is. I'm not watching Livewire.
That's true. Well, Jonathan Coachman hosts it, but back to the announcing dilemma that we talked about before.
Well, it's interesting to see. Obviously, WCW is bringing in their faces. I shouldn't say WCW is bringing in, but you know what I mean. Lance Storm got a face pop, even though he wasn't.
What? Canada.
Obviously, yeah. Hugh Morris, obviously a true
well, he's
face
not that
of
poor
WCW.
drone he was in WCW, spouting that same line over and over again. Yeah. Maybe he has babyface potential that WCW never tapped into. We don't know because, quite frankly, WCW sat on their hands with Storm.
I thought he made a decent heel to begin with, but it's just me.
I would say, speaking of potential, possibly that was been untapped. Hugh Morris. Maybe I'm wrong here. I mean, he's got 2 bad knees, but I think he has a slew of potential. He showed it. Well, back in the old WCW, as I like to refer to it, he was well respected. Everybody wanted to see him, get his due, get a push, get a title. Just that alone, being well respected, you have a plethora of talent, or else you wouldn't be well respected. See Bull Buchanan. I didn't just say that. But you understand what I'm trying to say. If the WWF and WCW can tap into his untapped potential, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, with his WCW stint, they made a big deal about how this guy worked so hard, and that's always a good thing. The WWF did that a few years back with Goldust and Mankind, and look what happened. Well, 1 out of 2, but
possibly debuting him on Raw, maybe that's a step in the right direction. Maybe it shows that they have interest in him and pushing him in the new WCW as whatever. So I think we're running out of time.
Right. We're going to come back, and we talked some WCW last segment, or this segment, I should say. Coming up, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the WCW prospects. So come back.
Edition of Pro Wrestling Review Trivia, sponsored by us and Pizza Works. So without any other further ado, you know what I'm trying to say in layman's terms. That's Pig Latin.
Oh, okay. I thought so.
Give the people what they want.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. First question. In what country was Bruno Sammartino born, and which United States city did he immigrate to? He was born in Italy, and he came to the fair city of Pittsburgh. In what state was Jesse Ventura born? Minneapolis, Minnesota. Well, Minnesota would have been fine. What is Roddy Piper's real name, and what country was he born in? His real name is Roderick Toombs, and he was born in Glasgow, Scotland. And the question from last week's show, how many WrestleManias did Kamala appear at? Just one, ladies and gentlemen, WrestleMania X7.
Just think all the talent they missed with that one appearance.
I know.
The chops, the splashes he had.
This week's winner was Adam Stahl from Pittsburgh, so congratulations.
Tell the man what he's won, because, this is going to be a little uncharted water.
Actually, we're going to put Brian's face on you after in the production meeting. But
well, not from us, from Pizza Works. He wins 1 large, 1-topping pizza, a dozen wings, and a 2-liter carbonated beverage. You can redeem that anywhere at their DeVosburg, Jefferson Hills, and Finneyville store.
And as you people crave it, I am going to give it. This week's question is, who was Buff Bagwell's partner for his first WCW Tag Team title reign? And no, Rennie is not a choice. Once again,
I was considered, but
I realize that. Who was Mr. Bagwell's partner for his first WCW Tag Team title reign?
And to enter, they can go to...
Oh, Jim, I told you, uncharted water for me.
See, Brian leaves 1 week.
I come up with the witticisms, but you can, go to ProWrestlingReview.com, answer those 3 questions on the website. This one from the show, name, address, date of birth, inseams, favorite color, whatever you want to send us. Just make sure name, address, and I think phone number, city, whatever. So go to the website, and do I usually take this out? Yes, I do. Go to the website, happy answering, and we wait to hear from you.
debut, I guess you could say, on Raw. We're going to jump in now and talk a little bit more about some of the guys that WCW and, well, the new WCW and the WWF have been negotiating with to possibly bring into WCW. Some of the names have been thrown out already: Rob Van Dam, Scott Hall. Let's start with Rob Van Dam. From what I know, this is done. That Rob Van Dam has been signed. I guess on his website, he had said he had talked about possibly working for the WWF again. For those who don't know, in 1997, Rob Van Dam was part of that ECW Invasion angle on the WWF programming. He did a couple little things and really kind of fell into obscurity. He teamed with Jerry Lawler on Shotgun, which was ridiculous. But, I mean, we've talked a lot on this show about Rob Van Dam and some of his faults, I guess you could say. But, I mean, what do you think he can do for WCW as far as star power is concerned?
That's an interesting question. Here's a guy with a lot of baggage and needs a lot of work. But if it works out...
He's also a guy that people get into.
Exactly. And if he, like I said, if he already appeals to a lot of people that like wrestling for what it is now, the high spots and things like that. If he can take the aspect of what Chris Benoit can do, and even what we saw from Rhino and Taz and Matt wrestle a little bit, he's going to appeal to the other half of the people that always said, well, he's overrated. I think it's a risk worth taking. I mean, I think his price has gone down a lot, obviously. He has nowhere else to go. It's time for him to check the ego at the door and learn how to wrestle.
Well, I have a question about Van Dam, and I pose it to you two and anyone out there, and please don't take this too literally. Did Rob Van Dam ever give an interview without Bill Alfonso by his side?
That's, I think, another part of the baggage I was just talking about.
Yeah, that's another Rob Van Dam downfall.
Very different style interviews. Probably worse than, I would say, a Hawk or an Animal interview, where they get their point out, they scream, and that's a good thing. But Rob Van Dam has never given anything more than what he was doing in the dressing room before the camera came in.
That was the catch with him on ECW. A lot of the times his interviews were scripted to the word. A lot of times he got a lot of coaching with what he said. You notice not a lot of live interviews at arena promos. Again, another thing you have to work with with Rob Van Dam.
Well, don't forget, too, I mean, and I think bringing Rob Van Dam to WCW is a smart thing. I don't think he fits in with the WWF. I don't think there's a lot of guys that he could actually wrestle and feud with that would make a lot of sense. But I think with Rob Van Dam, if you position him as a main eventer, you could maybe bring up some of your guys like Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Hare and those kind of guys. And I mean, maybe they could mesh well with Van Dam, but I couldn't see Van Dam and Steve Austin wrestle. There's something about that just doesn't click. And not so much like, well, Jericho, and what about him? You know, he's a high flyer, but that's Van Dam that's all he is, really.
Yeah, and Jericho can also brawl. Let's not forget that. And
true.
There's aspects of mat wrestling that WWF has that even WCW didn't have before they folded. I don't know. I think, like I said, it's a bargain. If you get him at a bargain price, pushing him to main event, I mean, they're already talking about him being one of the top-level guys. It's premature for that.
Well, I'd like to elaborate on that a little bit about being a top-level guy in WCW. People have already gone out as far as to say that Rob Van Dam is the second coming of Shawn Michaels. Maybe interviews, yeah, second coming of interviews for Shawn Michaels. But as far, Michaels was probably, in his time, the best worker, pound for pound, as they say, best worker in the business. His interviews weren't always that great. His matches were, I'll tell you what, every time Michaels went out there, Ross is right in what he says. He gave a show. He gave his heart out, or whatever the hell you want to say. Granted, in the back, he pissed everybody off, but that's another story. But by no means is Rob Van Dam. He could be, with the proper schooling, as you guys alluded to. Maybe not a carbon copy of Shawn Michaels, maybe a little bit touching that level, but not really.
I want to point out two things that dispel all the ECW fans that are screaming right now. Shawn Michaels did two things better than anyone. Number one, he made a lot of people look a lot better. And number
Sid
two,
Vicious, Kevin Nash.
We can go on for years. But the thing Van Dam never learned, the thing Shawn Michaels did with anybody, even Bret Hart, building the drama throughout the match, beginning, middle, end. I see Van Dam going for his five-star frog splash, like in the first minute of a match.
And the thing is, he hits it too.
Work. Sure. Well, yeah, he hits it. It's a great-looking frog splash.
Oh, absolutely.
Not a minute into a match, though.
Austin, and there's some people out there, I'm sure, right now. Well, maybe not out there. Austin goes for a stunner 2 minutes into the match. He never hits it, does he? Unless it's a TV match with Mabel.
He builds it.
Absolutely, the drama in a match.
That's another thing with Van Dam you got to work. And I'm going to say something nice about Van Dam here, so brace yourselves. The guy's possibly the most athletically gifted wrestler out there right now. Sorry.
Fell off the chair.
I mean, we got a tremor on the ground here.
A lot of talent, a lot of high spots. We'll see if he can turn it into something else.
One thing, too, I think that hampered Van Dam a lot, and this goes along with the inability of him to tell a story, was the fact that he's always pandering to the crowd. I mean, that's something he constantly does. And I know that, people have said to make Chris Benoit better, you're going to have to make him a guy that interacts with the crowd. But I think Van Dam does it too much. I think it's one of those things where I think he loses sight of what the match has to be, what has to be said in the match.
I can agree with that. I just, like I said, there's a lot of work with Van Dam. Is he the second coming of Shawn Michaels?
Well, I don't think anybody's really that. Maybe
No.
our next guy on the list, which I don't know if we have time to get to, but maybe Scott Hall for his membership in the Click. He had a little card. I saw it.
Yeah,
membership
it's
lifetime.
Like to an aerobic center, Gold's Gym and that stuff. But actually, Tom, we are out of time. We're going to come back. We're going to talk a little bit more about some WCW guys. Scott Hall's on the list, and I think Buff Bagwell's on there too. We don't know why, but come back. We'll talk more.
I want to razor edge the Pro Wrestling Review show right into the ground, or outsider edge, I guess you could say. With what? That's good stuff.
It's on the card, Jim. You have to read the card.
We're
not structured.
That's right. We got.
Well, in layman's terms, we'd like to talk about a couple more guys in WCW, at the new WCW. Well, Buff Bagwell, I know you're just itching to say something about Bagwell. You're going to save that for the rants, but also a name that's brought up more times than not, Scott Hall, in the new WCW. Why not?
Wasn't he drunk the last time we saw him?
Oh, but he's clean now.
Clean now. Here's a guy who I guess got fired, as I recall, from WCW.
You look a little irritated, by the way.
I hate Scott Hall.
Oh, really?
I hate him.
Something new every minute.
So he goes to ECW, and all he had to do in ECW was stay clean and stay sober for what, a month? And the big dumb schmo couldn't do that.
Yeah, but the Candidos were backstage. Uh-oh. Didn't say it.
No, you know what, though? The thing of it is, to me, Scott Hall, when he was around, was he a troublemaker in the back? Was he too much to deal with? Yeah, you could say that he was, but here's a guy that, again, he's like a Rob Van Dam, who we talked about last segment. The people just like him. They like watching him if wrestle. They like his character. And if he can stay clean, I think he's worth investing in. And like you said, to go back again to how much did it cost to get him? If he's going to be making $2 million, which he's not,
I can see
maybe
your
he'll
point
take
there.
a bargain
You're
contract.
right. If he can
prove
stay
himself.
clean, which is iffy, first of all, and number two.
Oh yeah, it is. I mean, consider
you're right. It is the money they invest in it. I mean, if they're like paying him an hourly wage or something, then it might be worth it.
plus tips.
Well, not to basically crap on the guys that the WWF has signed for WCW, Mike Hino's, Mike Awesome, Lance Storm, guys like that. There aren't really any quote-unquote big names in WCW now, as far as like a Booker T, who's still waiting for his buyout, I believe, a Dallas Page.
Well, let's face it, that's going to happen, though.
Yeah, both
granted,
those guys
but still, on paper, it hasn't happened yet. You don't have any big Scott Steiner names, any big main events, and word has it, through the grapevine, once again, TNN's kind of souring on the fact that the WWF wants to promote WCW's new show on Friday nights, I believe, or even give them a time slot, so to speak, because the old WCW was built around Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Bertha Faye, whoever, insert names here. The point of the matter is, and I brought this up to the other panel, and they really, really liked it, so I'm going to reiterate it again during the break.
The people
You liked it, Jim.
But people know at home. Yeah,
but the point is, WCW's time slot is tentatively set for, I believe, Friday, Saturday nights late, say 11 to whenever. Are you going to stay up as a fan of pro wrestling to watch Hulk Hogan, if he were around, Randy Savage, if he were around, in the main event at 11:50 at night or 12:50 at night? No! Are you going to stay up to watch Van Dam in the main event that late? Possibly. Scott Hall? Well, he'll be drunk by then.
But other than that, he's clean.
You understand my point I'm trying to make.
Yeah,
I mean, they got to create new stars and new appeal.
Absolutely.
And Van Dam, like we said, has some of that appeal.
And Scott Hall could be considered kind of the old guard or the old dog of WCW, but he does have he has a good work rate, like we said, when he's clean, has a good look to him, apparently someone thinks that's funny, but I don't know why. Anyway, I totally lost my train of thought.
Let's face it, he's 2 years past being any sort of production.
But he's been on the shelf for 2 years, drinking himself into oblivion.
That's his problem. That's the problem. That's his problem.
But if you talk to Kevin Nash now, which I have, actually it was reported on a website, a pretty reliable website. Scott's in Japan. He's clean. He's loving what he's doing. He's loving getting over. He loves sushi. Loves women again.
Loves getting over. Does he love pudding?
Loves women again?
That was a little sidebar.
Delayed reaction there. He loves getting over. Does he love putting over?
Well, Jim, he didn't elaborate on that. This is Kevin Nash talking. He did fake a heart attack to avoid putting over.
Didn't he job out in ECW to Big Sal?
That doesn't matter. I'm sorry.
Mate.
Mud on the face.
No, I'm sorry. That doesn't matter. Again, that just goes back to what a complete and total dumbass this guy is.
Oh, jeez.
He'll job the
how
Sally.
can you say that now?
No, well, here's how I can say it. He'll job the Sally to get his job back to WWF, but he can't stay sober for a month?
That's two different things we're talking about.
Well, I mean,
I'm not going to say he's going to be sober, but I'm saying at least he went out and jobbed out to a big fat nothing.
let me
Plus
bring
he
up
did that 4 years earlier against King Mabel, but that's another
let me be the voice of reason for I think maybe the first time in 3 years. And granted, we do take our shots at Scott Hall, Chris Candido, guys like that. I'm sure staying sober is a little more complex than we give it credit for, obviously. I mean, we are dealing with a controlled substance here. And putting over is probably, I'm willing to bet, I mean, I'm not any kind of addict or anything like that. I mean, you've heard stories about different things like that, and how Behind the Music is full of them. As far as putting somebody over, sure, that lasts for how long. Being addicted to something is kind of a more serious issue, obviously.
I understand the problem Scott Hall has, and yeah, it's a problem, and he has to deal with it. And if he has a kick, that's great. If he has a kick, then I don't want to say this to be mean, but never comes back to wrestling. If he has a kick, great. I mean, that's a problem. You got a kick before wrestling becomes an equation.
Well, it could be just. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. But the fact is, we all make choices in life. Scott Hall made a choice in ECW when he was a month away from his job back with the WWF to get drunk and go on a highway.
True.
And I'm sorry, that's wrong. He should not be rewarded for it. He shouldn't be being talked to right now, and there's no proof whatsoever that he has his kicked.
So you don't give him you wouldn't give him a chance in the WWF with, one strike and you're out policy.
And this is truly a one strike and you're out policy.
No.
Where's he going to go?
One strike and you're out policy was in ECW.
Well, it's a new business now. Everything's controlled by the WWF.
Let's not forget an important point either. Part of this problem, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I know you're going to talk about him later, they gave Bagwell another chance. Scott Hall, in my eyes, being an alcoholic is a lot cooler than being Buff Bagwell. And like I said, I mean, I apologize for the insincerity of that, but you understand what I'm trying to say. Bagwell has burned every bridge more than Shane Douglas is, from all reports, hard to handle. Scott Hall, give him one more chance. If he strikes out, he's gone.
Well, you know what?
Where's he going to go?
Well,
XPW.
That's true. One more point we want to bring up before we leave is the fact that a lot of these problems Scott Hall had may be directly related to or contributed by wrestling. Maybe being on the road. There's not. What else are you going to do? You're going to go drink. You're going to, guys. And here's another point we want to bring up that we missed earlier in the show. Eddie Guerrero was sent home from Raw because he's having trouble with painkillers. So does wrestling directly relate to the problems that Scott Hall's having? And coming back to wrestling, is that kind of inviting the problems back?
It's a possibility.
Is there a direct correlation?
That's what I'm saying.
I think there is.
Scott Hall has to make the decision to kick this habit. And I'm sorry, there's a time you got to put the beer down. I mean, I don't care
Maybe
how far
this
you're
is
on
the
the
time,
road.
though.
I don't care how lonely you are. I don't care how much
agree
pain you are.
that he should, he's an
Scott Hall
adult.
and
He
Eddie
should
Guerrero.
make adult decisions.
That's two guys. There's 1,000 other workers out there that aren't doing what they're doing.
Well, the bottom line is Scott Hall is still a big name. I mean, depending on even the casual wrestling fan, Scott Hall is a big name. I would say, just give him another chance. If it happens again, he's gone. He's going nowhere, literally and figuratively.
Exactly.
And with that,
we're going to come back. We're going to do our world famous rants minus Brian, but we hope you still like him anyway.
XFactor. No, maybe this. This past week, I read something somewhere that just totally blew my mind, and I forget which expert said this on the internet. It said something to the effect of, well, with the void left by Triple H, maybe it's time for X-Pac to be elevated to the top heel status. I'm sorry. I really got through that with a straight face. Let me just say this. No. I don't know what's going on with this whole X-Factor thing. It's not to the point now, time-wise, where it's failed. But wasn't this supposed to be the group that X-Pac was supposed to be the big leader, and he was supposed to get his shot, and he was supposed to lead this team, and it's not happening. X-Pac has, it goes back to what I've said 1,000 times before. When he's motivated, he's fine. He's never motivated. Just Incredible hasn't improved all that much, not what I expected. He seems pretty much exposed now without being in ECW, which really shocks me to say that. And now we're starting to improve a little bit, but as a team, these guys just aren't meshing, they're not growing, and they're not moving, and nor should they. Now, having said all that, I don't know if the WWF's really serious about these guys. I don't know if they're serious about X-Pac. But if they are, they got to put these guys in a position to sink or swim. After Jericho and Benoit finish with Austin on a singles level, maybe you do give X-Factor the push to the titles to see what they have. I think it's nothing. I think they are gonna sink. But if the WWF is serious about them, which they still appear to be, that's how you got to find out. Real quick, just another point I want to bring up. I want to talk about the Dudley Boys a little bit. With Edge and Christian kind of starting to split up, with the Hardys starting to split up, maybe it's time to move the Dudley Boys up again. Maybe it's time to rebuild your tag division around them. I see a lot of good things in the Dudley Boys. They've done everything you've asked. They've showed a lot of character traits, strong on the mic, strong ballers, great bump takers. And if you want to rebuild your tag division, Dudley boys are the ones that do it around.
I have one of their shirts, so you know.
Well, then that's all the reason. Then.
I'm in. So. We talked last segment about some of the stars that WWF has been recruiting for their new WCW. We touched on it briefly with Buff Bagwell. You know, for some reason, I think Vince and all his buddies there who are picking these guys, they think that Buff Bagwell is like this tremendous talent, this tremendous main eventer. That goes along the same lines with Michael Cole being a solid number 2 announcer. It just doesn't make any sense. And to me, all Buff Bagwell is, he's never beaten anybody. He's a tag team wrestler. He's won the tag team titles 5 times. Who's never done anything. That's all he is. And he puts up fusses about, you know, I don't want to lose to this guy. Me and Lex, if we go out there, we're going to job. And then don't bother to ask us to be on Nitro. All this other stuff. Who is this guy to say anything? He hasn't done anything. Why? Because Bill Apter delivered that plaque to your house in '92 to make you Rookie of the Year? Who cares? You're not worth a chance in the WWF or WCW. You know, I don't understand Vince's logic because he said for the longest time, Bagwell's not worth investing in my WWF. Now all of a sudden, because he's got like $40 million on the line, he's going to give Bagwell this second chance. The guy has a horrible attitude. He's never done anything, and he's just not worth it. And on a side note, a few weeks ago, I brought in one of these little calendar sheets, and I mentioned how stupid Kevin Kelly was. Well, the man has struck again. I'm going to read this question to you very quickly, and you think about what the answer is, and I'll give you the choices, and then I'll reveal him for being the moron that he is. Which of these superstars hadn't won the King of the Ring title as of the end of 1999? Here's your choices. Ken Shamrock, Billy Gunn, Triple H, Mankind, or X-Pac. Now, to me, Ken Shamrock won the title, or crown, or whatever it is, in 1998. Billy Gunn won it in 99, which came in June of 99, which is before the end of 99. For all you calendar buffs out there. Triple H. Thanks, Jim. Triple H won the crown in 97. Okay, Mankind and X-Pac, neither one of them have ever won the King of the Ring, yet they're both listed on here, which goes against every rule of multiple choice ever instilled in a school. But here's the answer. Ken Shamrock. Wow. He won it in 98. Mankind and X-Pac never even, Mankind was in the finals, X-Pac was in the finals. I don't understand where they come up with this stuff. I'll be back some other time to talk more about, because there's a lot more days left in this year, so we'll see you later.
Well, the question of logic in pro wrestling comes up more often than not, and I would like to address from this past Monday, when Jesse Ventura made the match on Raw, actually made the match stick, I believe he used, again with Steve Austin champion and Chris Jericho. And everybody all over the internet is basically burning their keyboards right now saying, how can Jesse Ventura, the governor of Minnesota, make a match on Raw? I have the answer for you. It's the same way that Kane brought The Undertaker's dead parents out on the stage at Raw, chokeslammed The Undertaker through his mother's casket, and now they were tag team champions and now they're friends. Wrestling is entertainment, nothing more, nothing less. Sometimes they forget what they did in the past, sometimes they don't. But just enjoy it for what it is, solidly, entertainment. And on a second note, I was reading a Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter about 2 weeks ago. It was listed in there, www.prowrestlingtorch.com. Thank you, Wade Keller. But it was listed in there that the WWF, the powers that be, let's say, and I don't mean Russo and Ferrara, those two jack-offs, but the powers that be, what? The powers that be are considering, see now the point is lost under humor, but the point I'm trying to make is they were considering Scott Hudson to lead up the new play-by-play for the new WCW. And my question is, why in the hell would you even think about that? You already have 3 losers in Cole, Kelly, and the guy that runs track at Penn State. What's his name?
The coach.
The coach. Why would you want Scott Hudson, who, in addition to making outlandish comments, ones that I can't even attain to that are insensitive, more insensitive than mine, he has no talent. He works for the government, for God's sake. There's the first indication right there. But if you're still looking for a lead play-by-play or color announcer, I got him right here for you, and he's equipped with clip-on mic. It's Kermit the Frog, and guess what, kids? He's filled with stuffing, and he's more intelligent than Scott Hudson ever was.
You just threw the mic.
Yeah, but there was no power to it. Roddy Piper wasn't using it. I don't know.
Okay, if you want to read my column, you can pick it up on the newsstands tomorrow, or you can read it on the web. It's www.triblive.com/sports. The radio show is every Monday. It's the Ryan Patrick Show, 1370 AM, Wheeling, West Virginia, ESPN affiliate. 5 p.m. I put up 10, but it's 5.
It's www.prowrestlingreview.com. Pro Wrestling Review at lycos.com. Send us a mail. God, we have nothing to talk about next week.
Jim, don't give away the format.
I'm sorry. Are researchers that far ahead? They're a week ahead?
They're light years ahead. They know what they're doing. They know their crap.
Booked up until August.
And the question, once again, to answer for this week, in addition to the 3 on the website, ProWrestlingReview.com, is who was Mr. Bagwell's partner for his first WCW Tag Team title reign? And no, Scott Hudson is not the answer, and neither is Rennie. So check out the website, check out the columns, just check us out in general. So for me, for Rennie, for Jim, and for Brian, we'll see you next week. Brian and you fans next week. This is Pro Wrestling Review saying we love you. See you next week.